Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are taking what you might call the ultimate road trip.
Hmm. That's one way to put it.
Yeah, it's a journey that goes through the entire modern criminal supply chain. We're doing a really deep, granular look at the operations of the Sinaloa cartel.
An organization that, you have to remember, despite decades of enforcement action, despite capturing its most famous leaders,
Like Chapo.
right, like Chapo, it remains the undisputed heavyweight champion of transnational crime globally.
So our mission today is, it's a heavy one, but it's pretty straightforward. We want to map the entire Sinaloa ecosystem.
We really need to move past the headlines, get into the actual mechanics of it.
Exactly. So we're going to start in what you could call the organizational boardrooms, the chemical labs in Culiacan.
And we trace a flow from there through these incredibly complex global logistics networks, then across La Frontera,
So U.S.-Mexico border itself?
and then right onto the streets, to the distribution endpoints, the stash houses right here in the U.S. consumer market.
And for this deep dive, we've pulled together a stack of uniquely candid sources. We're talking accounts from former smugglers, convicted high-level financiers.
Federal law enforcement specialists, and even, this is the tough part, the brutal perspective of actual sicarios.
Which gives us this really rare, almost unprecedented view, doesn't it? It spans from the highest levels of global shipping logistics.
All the way down to the ground level perspective of, street distribution, the chemical innovation, and the brutal mechanisms of control and enforcement.
And I think it's vital for you, the listener, to grasp the scale right out of the gate.
Yes.
Because we are not analyzing a traditional criminal enterprise here. This isn't just a street gang that got too big.
No, not at all. What we're really looking at is a complex, diversified, and quasi-governmental entity.
Mm.
It's an organization that has successfully institutionalized its power to the point where it mirrors the state.
And in a lot of places, it actually replaces the state itself.
It does.
Okay, so let's unpack that core reality right now, because I feel like it's the foundation for everything else we're going to talk about.
It has to be.
The Cartel del Sinaloa is the law in its home base, Culiacan. That's not hyperbole, is it? It's the shocking status quo that has allowed this whole thing to flourish.
That is the absolute crucial context. When you focus on Culiacan, which is the capital of Sinaloa State,
Yeah.
you're talking about a population of around 800,000 people.
Okay.
And the level of cartel penetration there it's just staggering. Our sources estimate that somewhere between 50,000 and 100,000 people are actively on the cartel payroll within that city.
Wait, just hang on a second. 50,000 to 100,000 people.
That's the estimate.
So you're telling me that nearly an eighth of the city's entire population is financially tied in some way to the cartel structure.
Exactly. And you have to understand that payroll isn't just, some low-level lookouts or street dealers.
Right.
It extends into every critical corner of civil society, of the infrastructure. We are talking about personnel at the airport, staff in local businesses, municipal utility providers, and critically, law enforcement. Many local and even some state police officers functionally, they're nothing more than paid sicarios or enforcers for the cartel.
So the operational line between being a state functionary and a criminal operative, it's just gone.
It has been completely and totally erased.
And this has to lead us to the political normalization, which is it's the most visible sign of the cartel's institutional power.
If the local government is that compromised, how high up does that corruption go?
It goes right to the very top of the political structure. Just consider the sheer deference that was shown by the former president of Mexico, Andrés Manuel López Obrador. AMLO, yeah. Specifically regarding the funeral for Chapo Guzman lawyer's mother in his small hometown of Badiraguato.
What happened there?
The sources confirm it. The former president authorized the closure of federal airspace over that entire area. He closed federal airspace. Why?
So the cartel could hold a large, completely undisturbed funeral procession for her.
That is an extraordinary political gesture. It's not just tolerance, that's facilitation.
It's active partnership in a way.
So what was the political thinking behind that? Even implicitly, was it just fear, or was it something more like a pragmatic recognition that the cartel is the only real governing force in that region?
It seems to be a cold political calculation. It's a mix of both. Fear and pragmatism.
Okay.
The sources suggest that by allowing this public display of respect and power, the government is essentially signaling that it recognizes the cartel's territorial control.
And that stability in that region is achieved through negotiation, not through confrontation.
Precisely. This institutional acceptance, it just reinforces the idea that the cartel isn't just tolerated by parts of the political establishment. It is, in many ways, an accepted parallel government. They control the social order, and the federal government, well, it often just steps aside.
So that's the macro picture of their control. But here's where it gets, I think, really interesting. We have to move beyond just the sheer power of the organization and look at how it actually operates on the inside.
Right.
Because the Sinaloa cartel that we all read about in the 90s, the one that the U.S. government built its whole kingpin strategy around, that is fundamentally not the same organization today.
Not at all. And that's the key analytical nugget we get from the high-level financial and organizational sources. It's this seismic shift in their evolutionary strategy.
How so?
Historically, the Sinaloa cartel operated as a rigid, vertical organization. You can picture it like a massive traditional corporation.
With El Chapo as the CEO.
El Chapo served as the CEO, the primary boss, and everything just flowed down from him through these fixed management layers.
And these managers were the Aldosagarios, right? Can you break down what their job was like compared to a modern manager in this new structure?
Absolutely. The Aldosagarios were essentially fixed managers. They were on a fixed payroll, and they oversaw specific operational sectors. A single transportation route, a specific purchasing zone in Colombia, or a distribution line into the U.S.
So they were salaried employees?
They were salaried employees of a single centralized enterprise. Every single element, from the raw production to the transporters and the street sellers, was directly accountable up that one vertical chain of command.
Which sounds incredibly slow, very rigid, and ultimately very vulnerable to that kingpin strategy.
It was.
You cut off the head, you arrest the CEO, and the body dies. So if that old model was so vulnerable, why did it last for decades under leaders like El Chapo?
Well, it persisted because the threat of total organizational collapse was less potent back then. The state itself was weaker, or at least less focused.
But the U.S.-led enforcement, the focus on high-value targets that forced their hand,
it forced them to evolve. And the modern model is far, far more resilient because it's decentralized. The business of actually selling and trafficking drugs has become highly fragmented. It's almost outsourced.
So instead of one single corporation, it's more like a network of cooperating franchises.
That's a much better way to phrase it.
Yeah.
Our sources detail that the operation is now separated into about 20 different major families or clans.
20?
Around that, yeah. And these clans act much more like coordinated high-level freelancers. They manage and coordinate drug traffic throughout Culiacan and the rest of Sinaloa state.
So they share resources?
They coordinate logistics, access, political payoffs. But they aren't necessarily reliant on one single point of failure, not like the old vertical fixed payroll model was.
That structural shift it's kind of genius.
It is.
It minimizes risk, it maximizes agility, and it makes enforcement targeting incredibly complicated.
Much more difficult.
But if the center of gravity has shifted from one supreme leader to these, autonomous but cooperating clans, who holds the ultimate power now? Because that brings us right to the high-stakes internal conflict that's defining the region today.
Right, and we're talking about the deep internal power split between the two dominant factions that emerged after Chapo's capture and removal.
Okay, who are they?
First, you have Los Chapitos. These are Chapo's sons, particularly Ovidio, Ivan, and Alfredo.
The princes.
You could call them that. They operate with very high visibility and immense brutality. They have successfully monopolized the local drug market within Culiacan itself.
The retail market.
The retail market, yes. All the drugs consumed in the city, the pot, cocaine, heroin, and especially the synthetics like ecstasy, that's their domain.
So they own the internal retail network inside the fortress. It sounds like a decent business, but a localized one, driven by a lot of street-level violence.
It is localized. And that's why they're constantly fighting for prestige and control, often through these very visible, very brutal displays of force. But they are dwarfed by the second faction.
And that would be?
Los Mayitos, led by Ismael El Mayo Zambada. He's often called the Old Man. He's the one who has never been captured.
Never.
And the Mayitos. They are the true empire builders.
So what specifically gives the Mayitos that strategic edge over the Chapitos? It can't just be experience.
It boils down to three things: resources, infrastructure, and political capital.
Okay.
Los Mayitos absolutely dwarfs Los Chapitos in terms of raw military power and available capital, but their political influence,
Right.
It's just unmatched. They control the critical infrastructure.
What does that mean exactly?
It means the major logistics routes,
Yeah.
the highways, the ports, the tunnels leading north. They control the fentanyl cooks hidden away in the mountains, the traditional poppy fields, and crucially, they maintain these entrenched, decades-old presences in key border cities like Tijuana and Nogales.
So they control the supply lines.
All of them. And they also have these established connections with South America groups, trafficking cocaine out of specific ports like Guayaquil, Ecuador. They're the global logistics arm.
So, to put it simply, the Chapitos are focused on retail and generating that street-level profit inside the city.
Right.
While the Mayitos control the manufacturing, the global sourcing, and all the logistics you need to move billions of dollars of product into the U.S. market.
That's it, exactly.
So the winner of this war isn't just winning a street fight. They're winning control of the entire supply chain.
That's the perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And the political maneuvering that comes from this split is, well, it's arguably the most important factor defining the future of the cartel. This power struggle ultimately hinges on which faction can broker the most stable, the most pragmatic deal with Mexico City.
With the federal government.
With the federal government, yes.
Yeah.
To effectively control and contain the violence.
So the goal isn't just to wipe out the rival clan, because that just generates instability and brings in unwanted federal attention.
That's right.
The ultimate goal is to get the federal government's implicit support. The right to establish control and stabilize the region, because a stable region means business can run smoothly again, and the violence doesn't escalate to a level that threatens, civilian life or international relations.
The sources confirm this cold, hard truth. The winner of this internal conflict will be the one the federal government ultimately supports, because that faction will offer the most stable path to maintaining the status quo.
And the status quo includes the necessary flow of corruption payments and keeping violence below a certain headline-grabbing threshold.
Yes. And this intense internal war, which is just marked by betrayal after betrayal, is slowly but surely shredding the cartel's long-held illusion of being these Robin Hoods that some local communities, believe it or not, still cling to.
All of this, the political maneuvering, the sheer cost of maintaining a private army of 50 to 100,000 people buying off the state, it must be astronomical.
It is.
So let's pivot to the economics. How exactly do they generate the capital to fund this quasi-state? And that brings us right to the source of their unbelievable wealth, their global logistics and the pure economics of the drug trade.
And this is where the deep dive into the numbers is it's absolutely fascinating. The cartels are so wealthy because they've optimized their production costs against consumer pricing in the largest, most profitable market in the world.
The United States.
The United States.
Okay, so let's break down that arbitrage using cocaine as the prime example. It all starts in South America, where the product is actually made.
Correct. A kilo of pure, uncut cocaine costs the cartels an estimated $500 to produce in Colombia.
$500?
That's their input cost. That includes the raw material, the labor, the initial processing, everything.
$500 for an asset that is about to travel thousands of miles and generate unbelievable levels of risk. So let's trace that value as it moves.
Right. So once that product successfully navigates the supply chain, often moving up through Central America and Mexico, and it sells wholesale in the U.S., let's say in a major distribution hub like Los Angeles.
Okay.
That exact same kilo now fetches between $30,000 and $35,000.
$30,000 to $35,000.
That margin is already astronomical. You're talking about a profit multiplier of 60 or 70 times the initial investment.
And that's just getting it to the West Coast. If they manage to push that product even further beyond the U.S. and across the Atlantic to Europe.
Well, if it makes it to high-demand areas in Europe, cities like Madrid or London, that same kilo of pure cocaine can fetch an astounding $60,000 to $70,000.
Wow.
The profit multipliers become absolutely massive. You're exceeding 100 times the cost of goods sold.
It makes perfect sense now why they're willing to lose 50%, 80%, maybe even higher percentage of their shipments to interdiction and still turn a staggering profit.
It's just a cost of doing business.
The loss of a $500 investment is meaningless if the remaining 20% of the shipment yields millions of dollars.
Precisely. This model is built entirely on volume and this massive price arbitrage. They don't need a high success rate. They just need scale. And that explains why Mexican cartels, and the Sinaloa cartel specifically, are the wealthiest organizations of their kind on the planet.
But why Sinaloa specifically? I mean, a European cartel might make more per kilo, right?
They might, but America is the #1 consumer nation in the world for these products. And the Sinaloa cartel monopolizes control over the entire 2,000-mile U.S.-Mexico border.
Ah.
That unparalleled access and scale to the primary market,
Grr.
your ability to just flood the zone,
Hmm.
that's what generates capital volumes that are just unmatched by any other criminal organization.
And they aren't just relying on their own territory. You mentioned their international partners in South America.
Oh, absolutely. They manage these incredibly sophisticated global supply chains. Sources note that Sinaloa partners extensively with groups like Los Tigres in South America to traffic drugs out of key ports.
Like where?
Specifically, Guayaquil, Ecuador. It's noted in the sources as an easy port because of lax controls and deep corruption. It makes it a reliable launchpad for their global shipments.
So from there, they can go anywhere.
From there, they move product to Asia, Australia, and Europe, all backed by the immense capital and political influence managed by the Sinaloa cartel.
This incredible margin, coupled with the constant grinding pressure from U.S. and Mexican interdiction efforts, DEA, CBP, Border Patrol, military, it must drive constant innovation and concealment.
It has to.
You have to be a chemist, a logistics expert, and an artist to reliably protect an asset worth up to $70,000 from point A to point B.
It fuels a genuine arms race in logistics sophistication. With these highly specific accounts, like that of Owen Hansen, a high-level financier and trafficker, detailing the extraordinary lengths they go to move hundreds of millions in cocaine internationally. The primary strategic goal is just to blend in, to disappear into legitimate commercial cargo and defeat all the sophisticated tools used for detection.
And this is where the sophistication moves beyond just, a simple trap car. We're talking about highly technical, chemistry-based concealment.
We are.
The methods Hansen described. He mentioned dissolving pure cocaine directly into wine bottles.
Yeah, and think about the technical challenge there. If you're going to dissolve an asset worth $70,000 into a liquid state, you need two things.
What are they?
First, you need a non-destructive chemical process to integrate it into the liquid without destroying the molecular structure of the cocaine. And second, you need a safe, efficient, and equally non-destructive process to extract and reconstitute the product on the other end without losing mass or purity.
So this isn't something a street smuggler just figures out in their garage.
No. This requires specialized chemists and dedicated lab infrastructure. This is R&D.
And because it's a liquid in a legitimate wine bottle on a commercial pallet, it bypasses the telltale signs of solid masses that X-ray scanners are designed to find.
Right.
And it might even defeat canine units, depending on the solvents they use.
That's the genius of it. And another ingenious method Hansen detailed was the use of hollowed-out chocolate bars.
Chocolate bars?
Hidden strategically on legitimate commercial pallets of chocolate. The idea is that an X-ray just sees a pallet of commercial chocolate, legitimate cargo. A drug dog might be completely confused by the powerful organic scent of the cocoa and all the packaging.
So these aren't just one-off tricks.
No, these are systemic, high-volume methods developed to counter multiple layers of detection at the same time.
Let's contrast that level of innovation, the chemical dissolution, the freight integration, with some of the earlier methods we've documented. They were clever, but far more rudimentary, yet equally indicative of this high-stakes survival improv.
Right. I mean, think back to the time when smugglers, anticipating detection by drug dogs, would just dip these large porous kilos of marijuana in liquid oil or some specific automotive grease
To mask the scent.
to mask the scent in a universal, powerful odor, or consider the extremely tactical method related to ground transport, drilling a couple of holes in a car trunk.
Why would they do that?
To intentionally accumulate road dust, grit, and debris during these long drives, 800 or 900 miles across the desert.
So that when the border agents finally opened it up,
The accumulated dust, the dirt, the road grime, it all made the modified compartment look completely normal, indistinguishable from a standard vehicle that had just finished a cross-country drive.
wow.
And that kind of survival improv, driven by the pressure of losing thousands of dollars and facing years in prison, has now evolved into high-level chemical engineering and commercial freight integration that cost millions to develop.
And that drive for innovation leads us right to the border itself, La Frontera, because all that expensive chemically concealed product eventually has to cross that 2,000-mile stretch into the U.S. consumer market.
And controlling those border cities, Tijuana, Nogales, Juarez, Matamoros, is absolutely non-negotiable for organizations like Sinaloa. These cities are strategic choke points. If you don't control the local infrastructure, you cannot reliably get billions of dollars of product across.
It's a massive logistical imperative. I mean, the cartels need control of every single resource required for a successful crossing, and those resources have to be housed right there at the border.
Exactly. This requires a whole specialized infrastructure. You need dedicated mechanics who can custom build those sophisticated traffic cars with hidden hydraulic compartments.
Right.
You need mules, drivers, people willing to risk decades in prison to pilot those vehicles. You need the established ability to pay off border guards or even CBP officials.
And you need eyes on the ground.
You need the lookouts, the punteros, who operate in shifts and communicate real-time enforcement activity. And of course, you need the establishment of U.S. stash houses on the receiving end to offload and repackage the product instantly.
Let's focus on one specific point you mentioned, Nogales. Our sources really emphasize its importance.
Nogales is a prime example of cartel entrenchment. Despite its relatively small size, the sources clearly state that this city has been a decades-long stronghold of the Sinaloa cartel. It's almost an open port for them. Its history and its location make it an absolutely critical piece of real estate in their logistical puzzle. It allows for everything from tunnel construction to high-volume vehicular traffic.
And this is where Frank's account comes in. A smuggler who detailed the specific ground-level tactics used to evade detection at this very crossing point, particularly when he was moving large volumes of marijuana.
What stands out in Frank's account is the environmental and psychological tactics he employed. It shows this deep understanding of human nature and policing habits.
He said smugglers actively seek out times when enforcement personnel are least motivated or least alert.
He preferred driving in bad weather, thunderstorms, heavy rain.
Why?
Because, as he put it, cops are human. They're less likely to pull people over and risk getting soaking wet for just a random traffic violation. You minimize the risk of a random stop by choosing miserable high-risk conditions where human fatigue and, aversion to discomfort are at their peak.
And for tactical support, they relied on classic, proven methods.
Like utilizing a spotter car, driving 10 or 15 minutes ahead of the main vehicle that's carrying hundreds of pounds of product.
Yeah.
And the spotter's job wasn't just to report back.
What else did they do?
If they spotted a state trooper or detected one on radar, their job was sometimes to speed up or drive erratically to engage the trooper to get them pulled over and draw all the attention away from the main load vehicle coming up behind them.
That is next-level dedication. But the real genius, the ultimate example of that survival improv, was the psychological tactic he used when he actually got pulled over.
This is a great story.
Frank detailed putting a Marine sticker on the trap car.
And he was preying on a known element of law enforcement culture.
The high percentage of ex-military who become police officers or border patrol agents.
Exactly. So if he got pulled over, the first thing the cop, often an ex-military officer, would see was that Marine sticker.
Yeah.
It establishes an immediate, if false, point of camaraderie.
And when Frank was pulled over in the pouring rain, his quick thinking response was it was phenomenal.
It really was.
He claimed he was on the way up to Portland to enlist. He spun this whole story about needing to get to the recruitment center immediately.
And the cop, a fellow military enthusiast, he immediately became sympathetic. He smiled, wished him best of luck, soldier, and just let him drive off.
Completely oblivious to the 30 pounds of product hidden in the trunk compartment.
And that decision saved his life and the load. It just highlights that at the ground level, moving product is often less about technology and more about real-time, high-stakes psychological warfare and improvisation.
But none of these tactical victories, not the chemical dissolution, not the psychological games, none of it matters if the foundation of enforcement is rotten.
Right.
And that brings us directly to the necessity of corruption as the lubricant for these massive operations.
Corruption is not a side effect of cartel operations. It is an essential, calculated operational cost. Ed Calderon's extensive counter-cartel work in Tijuana repeatedly highlighted this brutal reality.
And there's a real cynicism to the cycle, isn't there? American tax dollars are still used to fund vehicles, gasoline, weapons programs for Mexican forces that are supposed to be fighting the cartels.
And those American-funded resources often end up being compromised and turned against the very efforts they were supposed to support.
What's the prime example of this corruption undermining U.S. enforcement that we really need to highlight?
The most egregious recent example, the one that fundamentally damaged trust between the U.S. and Mexican enforcement agencies, was the case involving Mexico's former Secretary of Defense, General Salvador Cienfuegos.
Cienfuegos. He was arrested in the U.S. on very serious federal drug charges, which was an extraordinary feat of U.S. counter-narcotics work.
He was. But the Mexican government, led by the president at the time, made an immediate, unprecedented petition to the U.S. federal government to hand him over.
On what grounds?
They claimed they would investigate him in Mexico and that a U.S. prosecution was an offense to Mexican sovereignty.
And the U.S. complied.
The U.S. complied. They dropped the charges and sent the entire investigation packet, all the evidence, all the sources down south.
And what happened to Cienfuegos?
He was subsequently released immediately and simply driven home to his house in Mexico, despite the U.S. having a rock-solid open case against him.
When the U.S. gave up Cienfuegos, how did the sources characterize the mood inside the DEA and the DOJ? I mean, this single incident must have signaled to any high-level cartel partners that their cooperation with the U.S. was pointless.
The mood was characterized as devastating.
Yeah.
Trust-shattering. The sources suggest this incident single-handedly undermined years of bilateral security cooperation.
It sent a clear message.
It sent a very clear message. No matter what charges or evidence the U.S. gathers against a protected Mexican official, the Mexican federal government can nullify the case. It just illustrates the hopelessness for anyone trying to fight these cartels legitimately at the highest levels.
So, with the products safely across the border and political stability secured through this endemic corruption, the next critical phase is the U.S. distribution network. This is how they generate those multi-million-dollar revenues that fund the entire diversified ecosystem.
We shift now from the high-stakes border crossing to the logistics of moving that product hundreds, even thousands of miles further inland, where the real profits are realized.
Let's follow the money again, specifically using the pricing for marijuana before widespread U.S. legalization changed the whole calculus.
Okay.
The goal was always shipping east, right, where prices fetched a much higher premium than in the border states.
Let's use specific numbers from our sources on this. If we look at the wholesale price for a pound of weed purchased in Tucson, Arizona, right near the border, it was around $430 per pound.
That's the cartel's internal transfer price.
That's their cost. Now, you have to factor in all the risks, the labor, the fuel, the bribes for transport.
Okay, so once all those logistics were factored in, paying the crews, covering transport costs, the risk premium, what's the total cost per pound delivered to a distribution hub in, say, Ohio?
The total cost per pound delivered to Ohio was about $530.
$100 per pound in logistics cost to move it across the country. But the markup is where the profit just explodes.
Exactly. That $530 product was then sold to mid-level distributors and organized crime groups in the Midwest and on the East Coast for $800 to $900 per pound.
So you're making $300 or $400 a pound.
That consistent profit margin of $300 to $400 per pound was the reliable engine of this business before the market was flooded by state-legalized cannabis. The high volume ensured a massive flow of capital.
And this profit engine required reliable, entrenched partners inside the U.S. to manage those endpoints, people who could absorb hundreds of pounds and move it to retail quickly.
Right.
And that's where American distribution networks, specifically established gangs, come into play.
We see this clearly in the account of Tank, a high-ranking Crip, who detailed his direct cartel trafficking connections.
So what was his role?
Tank effectively served as a logistical bridge, linking powerful Mexican suppliers directly to the established distribution network of LA street gangs. It just reduced friction and increased the volume for both organizations.
And these American partners are absolutely essential for the retail level, particularly in massive, dense population centers where demand is constant and the logistics of moving small amounts are challenging.
Yes, and on the East Coast, the dynamics were a little different, but just as essential for that high-volume distribution.
How so?
On the East Coast, particularly in massive urban centers like New York City, the Dominicans and Jamaicans historically served as the critical retail base for both Mexican and Colombian cartels.
Any specific examples?
Think of neighborhoods like Washington Heights in Manhattan. It's a prime example. The cartels could flood the U.S. market with product, but they needed these localized, entrenched organizations with deep ties to the community and street knowledge to handle that final mile distribution efficiently and quickly.
So the Mexican cartels function as the wholesalers and the financiers.
Right.
And the American gangs and distribution networks function as the dependable, high-volume retail end.
And that relationship is what made organizations in Sinaloa and Colombia extremely wealthy, because they had guaranteed retail outlets clearing their product constantly.
But this structure is constantly forced to adapt. And nothing illustrates the entrepreneurial drive and ruthless efficiency of the cartels better than their decisive pivot to synthetic drugs.
This is a whole different ballgame.
This shift isn't just about changing the product. It's about radically reducing the barrier to entry for criminal enterprise globally.
Yeah, let's analyze that economic shift, focusing on fentanyl and methamphetamine.
Okay.
The economic driver is stunningly simple. The barrier to entry is radically lower. Unlike traditional crops like cocaine, which needs a specific climate, vast plantations, complex crystallization knowledge.
Or marijuana, which needs acreage and time.
Right, you don't need expert agricultural knowledge or huge tracts of land for synthetics. You need a chemical recipe, precursors, and a cook. This manufacturing-based model is the new reference for any criminal group looking to level up their operations quickly and cheaply.
It's truly industrializing organized crime. It's moving it from agriculture and land ownership to chemistry and logistics.
It is.
And fentanyl's integration into the cartel model is tied directly to real-time market feedback from the street.
Absolutely.
Woo!
The sources provide a really chilling detail on this. Cartels didn't necessarily invent the synthetic crisis from some pure strategic plot. They began mixing heroin with fentanyl after their street users started complaining.
Complaining about what?
Complaining that the purity and potency of the heroin they were selling was too low.
So they were just responding to consumer demand for a stronger product.
Exactly. This wasn't a malicious plot initially to wipe out their user base. It was a response to market feedback for higher potency. They received good comments from the street regarding the mix, and this direct feedback loop drove the systemic integration of fentanyl into their operations.
It proved to be a product that was cheaper, easier to produce, and more potent.
Which led to guaranteed market share.
And what about methamphetamine? That's the silent giant in their synthetic portfolio, right? It's driving massive global profits for Sinaloa, far exceeding the localized impact of fentanyl.
Methamphetamine is cooked extensively in the clandestine labs of Sinaloa, and then it's shipped globally to Europe, to Asia, and it's opening new markets in South America where it used to be just cocaine.
So it's a core product.
Alongside cocaine and weed, methamphetamine remains one of the most widely used and reliably consumed drugs internationally. It's a massive industrial-scale revenue stream. They're cooking it like a commercial factory operation.
This successful diversification of product leads us to the full scope of their criminal portfolio, because full drug legalization, which a lot of people propose as a solution, would not eliminate these organizations.
Not even close.
They are now operating a complete criminal ecosystem.
That is the brutal, undeniable truth that has to inform any policy discussion. Cartels have successfully diversified their offerings, and that renders a singular war on drugs obsolete. The new product, or rather their now second largest revenue stream, is human smuggling.
And the revenue scale is terrifying. The sources estimated that under the previous U.S. administration, human smuggling was generating up to $14 billion annually for Mexican criminal organizations.
$14 billion.
That is not petty crime. That is truly big business, and it's often segmented into tiers of service that look remarkably like a travel agency.
They offer tiered service based entirely on a migrant's ability to pay. The highest tier is exemplified by the smuggling of Chinese nationals. These individuals pay the cartels a premium.
How much?
$35,000 per head. And that's for what is essentially VIP treatment and a guaranteed success.
$35,000 for border transit. How is an operation like that managed logistically?
It's a high-level organized travel service. The operation is coordinated through secure platforms like WhatsApp and Signal. The process often involves organizing flights from Asia, usually through a country like Ecuador, which requires no travel visa for Chinese nationals.
So they bypass a lot of the initial checks.
They do. And from there, the cartel handles every single step. Secure transportation, high-end hotel stays, and guaranteed passage to the U.S. border, ensuring they avoid the harsh conditions and dangers faced by other migrants.
So this sounds less like typical border smuggling and more like a high-end, discreet, global travel and immigration service, a criminal luxury operation.
Precisely. They are providing specialized, high-profit services. Now, contrast that successful high-end operation with the tragic plight of the most vulnerable.
Central American migrants.
Central American migrants, like Venezuelan peasants, who might spend their entire life savings, say $10,000 on that long journey, crossing the dangerous Darien Gap and trekking all the way through Mexico.
And these individuals are often caught in a trap once they reach the border, aren't they?
They are. Due to U.S. policies, particularly things like the Remain in Mexico provisions or the Title 42 restrictions that were in place, many of these highly vulnerable migrants are forced to stay in Mexico for long periods.
And they become easy prey.
Easy prey for Mexican criminal organizations. They face terrible abuse, kidnapping, extortion, and systemic sexual violence, including rape. because they are stripped of all protection and are totally reliant on these criminal groups for passage or even for basic survival.
The power of the cartel, whether they're trafficking synthetics or people, is ultimately maintained through one universal currency.
Extreme, constantly deployed, and normalized violence.
And the scale and the specific nature of this violence is what defines their territorial control and their internal discipline. We can contextualize the role of the sicario, the hitman, by looking at some historical accounts.
Like the Cali cartel hitman's account of serving as the guarantee man in neutral zones like Honduras.
Okay, what exactly did the guarantee man do?
He was the neutral party. He was the human insurance policy. His role was to stand between multi-million-dollar drug buyers and sellers, often rival organizations, in a neutral country.
So he enforced the deal.
His presence and the reputation of the organization he represented was the only thing ensuring trust that the deal would be executed fairly and that neither side would immediately betray the other and take both the product and the cash.
You need that level of enforced trust for billion-dollar transactions.
You do. And in Sinaloa, this necessary normalized violence is the day-to-day reality. This was described by Armando, a former Sinaloa hitman whose accounts provided some chilling detail.
What did he say?
Armando detailed the constant state of war in the region, where death becomes what he called the bread of every day. The training and the operational life are structured around instant obedience and a complete normalization of lethality, both external and internal.
He recounted the paralyzing fear of a near-suicide mission.
Yes.
Being ordered to walk alone with just one pistol to confront an armored vehicle and 10 armed escorts. That's not a fight you walk away from.
The calculation was brutally cold. It was purely sacrificial. He might kill the high-value target in a surprise attack, but he certainly wouldn't survive to tell the tale.
And while the plan was eventually changed,
the immediate, non-questioning obedience to what was effectively a death sentence, it highlights the intensity of the internal control and the life or death stakes for any sicario within that structure.
And to maintain that internal discipline to extract information, the methods of interrogation and torture are they're terrifying and systematic.
Armando describes specific violence used for control and information gathering, including being severely beaten and subjected to water torture. He detailed having a wet rag or cloth placed over the face with water for 20 minutes during an interrogation.
A form of waterboarding.
Essentially, yes. This technique, a non-lethal, high-pain method that simulates drowning, is used because it leaves minimal external marks. That makes it ideal for interrogating personnel they might want to use again, or whose bodies they might want to discard later without obvious signs of injury.
This controlled violence became an absolute necessity when dealing with external competitors, most notoriously, the Zetas.
Right. And Sombra's account of fighting the Zetas in Coahuila frames that strategic conflict perfectly.
How are the Zetas different?
The Zetas represented a different, terrifying organizational model. They were operating with such extreme visible brutality that they were described as the narcos version of ISIS. Their tactics were so aggressive, so prone to civilian massacres, that even massive bribes weren't enough to make their activities palatable to local politicians.
So it forced a military-style confrontation.
With rival cartels and eventually with state forces, yes.
And the Zetas were effectively running a mini-corporation built on military precision and terror, having been founded by former Mexican Special Forces personnel.
They absolutely were. Their organizational structure was completely militarized. It included specific roles reflecting their military training and their advanced surveillance techniques.
Such as?
They employed Hoxhow cones, or lookouts for feeding intelligence, dedicated hitmen, specific drug dealers for points of sale, and resource mobilizers. They went scorched earth. They used terror as a weapon of organizational expansion.
The specific visual terror they generated through atrocities was a core tactic, wasn't it? It was designed to ensure no one dared challenge them.
Yes. They generated visual terror by disseminating videos online, showcasing their victims. Sources describe videos showing people sat down, their throats cut, and then a knife stuck through the trachea, causing them to drown slowly in their own blood. That level of calculated, sustained atrocity was designed not just to kill their rivals, but to generate such intense, paralyzing fear that no one, not the population, not the police, and not rival cartels, would dare challenge their authority in Coahuila or Tamaulipas.
And despite this overwhelming normalized violence, the cartels still attempt to maintain an appearance of order. It's like a parody of the state itself.
It is.
Which leads to these strange paradoxes like the cartel apology letter.
This is perhaps the best evidence that cartels view themselves as a governing body with a set of internal rules and a need for public relations.
What happened?
When U.S. citizens were tragically kidnapped and murdered, the cartels didn't run and hide.
Huh.
They issued apology letters, publicly claiming the crimes were committed by bad actors, drug runners, and low-level enforcers who had violated the official rules of the cartel.
So criminals in civilized countries run. Criminals in Mexico write press releases justifying their actions and promising internal investigations. It's an act of governance.
It is. They are trying to show the U.S. and the Mexican federal government that they can maintain a stable order and therefore are the pragmatic partner for peace. They set the rules of the territory.
And they don't just mimic state bureaucracy. They openly boast about their military engagement against the actual Mexican state.
They often feel they hold the strategic advantage over the military forces sent to combat them.
Really?
Sicarios openly boast about their military superiority, citing incidents such as successfully taking down a military helicopter during an engagement. They see themselves as holding the strategic advantage in terms of real-time intelligence.
Thanks to their punteros and the corruption.
Right. And faster personnel deployment and often superior firepower compared to the average Mexican soldier. They are constantly adapting to maintain superiority in what they view as just another phase of the war.
This has been a necessary, if deeply chilling, deep dive into the Sinaloa cartel's modern corporate and logistical operations. So to synthesize what we've learned, the cartel has successfully transitioned from a vertical agricultural model to a highly resilient, diversified corporate model.
And this new model is driven by the massive, easily produced profits from synthetic drugs and, critically, the booming revenue from human trafficking. That establishes them as a fully diversified criminal conglomerate.
Which means the simple war on drugs concept, focused narrowly on interdicting a single commodity like cocaine or marijuana, is now fundamentally obsolete.
Completely.
The cartels have already built a complete criminal ecosystem that legalization of one product alone would not dismantle.
And the immediate future of this entire ecosystem, it really hinges on the outcome of that internal conflict between the Chapitos and the Mellitos. The war is currently being waged not just for physical territory,
No.
but for the right to establish undisputed control and, crucially, to broker a deal for long-term stability with the federal government.
So who? Mexico City decides to support the aggressive but less politically savvy Chapitos, or the politically entrenched, globally logistical Mellitos? That will likely determine the longevity of the entire organization and the nature of the violence we see on both sides of the border.
The consolidation of power is essential for maximizing global profit and reducing the enforcement friction caused by all the infighting.
But while the mega cartels fight for political dominance and logistical control, the underlying economics of crime are changing everything. And I think this is the final thought we need to leave you with.
Right.
So what does this all mean for the future of organized crime in the Americas?
Well, we've established that the proliferation of synthetic drugs, fentanyl, methamphetamine, has radically lowered the entry barrier for organized crime globally.
Right.
The prerequisites for massive profit no longer require complex agricultural empires, vast land ownership, or decades-long political entrenchment. They require chemical cooks, cheap precursors, and a reliable distribution network, often facilitated by a VPN and encrypted messaging.
So, if the biggest, most powerful criminal empires organizations that require 50,000 employees to maintain can be challenged and potentially dismantled by cheaper, more potent drugs produced by smaller, hyper-violent, technologically savvy groups.
Groups that don't even necessarily need border access, thanks to technological partners.
Then we have to ask,
What new level of chaos will arise when the only prerequisite for establishing a transnational criminal organization is a chemical recipe and a strong encrypted internet connection? That technological shift is what you need to consider as this war evolves.